The Formless Mother is the outer god benefactor of luminary Mohg and his dynasty. When he stood before her underground, deep below the capital city of Leyndell, his blood boiled in a way that intoxicated him. His banishment to the shadows, his role as guardian of the path to the Three Fingers, even his accursed body, didn't matter anymore. After meeting this outer god, he understood her craving for wounds and built a dynasty on the foundation of worshipping her. His sacred spear, his instrument of communion with this god, came to be known as a symbol for his dynasty. So of course, it's more than a little jarring to be exploring the Land of Shadow and stumble across monsters performing rituals with their own spears, where they pierce the flesh of the Formless Mother. It would seem Mohg was not the first person she came in contact with when trying to stake a claim on the Lands Between. The Bloodfiends and their connection to blood sorcery likely predates Mohg finding the Mother of Wounds deep below Leyndell. So let's explore these early worshippers of the Formless Mother and study the wounds they open. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Elden Lore, our long-running series where we explore the people, places, and cursed creatures of the Lands Between and the Land of Shadow. If this is your first time finding the channel, thanks for checking out our content. With over 140 episodes in this lore series, we're confident you can find the stories of any character or enemy you're looking for. If not, feel free to leave a comment letting us know what you'd like us to look into, and I promise we'll read it. We also have a Discord, where fans come together to discuss the lore of Elden Ring, and how it's changed since the release of Shadow of the Erdtree. If you end up liking this video, please consider throwing us a subscription, but no pressure. We believe what really matters is the fact that you spent any time with us at all. With that said, let's get back to the story at hand. The Bloodfiends seem to be a singular race in the Land of Shadow, and while their physicality is slightly reminiscent of the Omen we see in the Lands Between, they're completely devoid of horns, their faces taking on a more rodent-like appearance, with two large front teeth and pointed ears. I think it's fair to say that there are no other creatures in Elden Ring that look quite like this, and we get an idea as to why from defeating the Bloodhound Chieftain and receiving the Bloodfiend Hexer's ashes. This spirit conducts blood boon rituals with a sacred spear, casts blood flame hexes, and takes a singular pleasure in letting the blood of foes. Long ago, a subjugated tribe discovered a twisted deity amongst the ravages of war, and they were transformed into Bloodfiends. The Mother of Truth was their savior. While we can't know for sure, I believe it was at least possible that the Bloodfiends may have been an offshoot of the demi-humans. We can certainly describe the demi-humans as a subjugated tribe in the Lands Between, but we don't see any examples of this in the Land of Shadow, outside of Onze, the swordsman who locked himself away in the Belorat jail. When considering the idea that the Omen are a cursed form of Hornsent, it does create a parallel to what the demi-humans may have been twisted into once they were transformed by the Mother of Truth. However, after speaking with other creators in the community, I believe there's a stronger theory as to the origins of these monsters. The Outer God Heirloom is a talisman engraved with the lore of an outer god. The clan, who lost everything in the Great Fires, peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. The clan had suffered such torment that the horrible thing was taken as an object of worship. This sounds a whole lot like the description we've just read of the Hexer ashes, but I believe there must be some mistake here. I was floored after speaking with Moxie Watson, Last Protagonist, to confirm that the original Japanese translation of these two items still aligned very well. This means the most likely origin of the Bloodfiends is actually the Hornsent. The corpse of their ancestor mentioned in the talisman seems to be a tutelary deity. The corpses of the ascetics trying to reach divinity, which hold divine spirit ash. After their land was razed by Mesmer's forces, some Hornsent saw the Mother of Wounds in the burning visage of one of their most sacred practices, leading them to her and transforming them into the Bloodfiends. Make sure to check out Last Protagonist's video diving into this, as I believe it lays out the theory better than I do here. Moxie also brought up an interesting idea that the Bloodfiends could be some form of what comes out of the jars as successful transformations, due to their smooth, round bodies, showing how we can interpret different origins with the info that we're given. All this said, there are a couple of issues I take with the idea of the Bloodfiends being horn-sent, even though it is the strongest possible origin we have. The Bloodfiends take on the appearance of rodents, as mentioned earlier, and are severely deformed, their bodies seeming more omen than anything else. Why would they look like this? Also, for former horn-sent, there's a distinct lack of horns on any of the Bloodfiends. In talking to Last Protagonist, he mentioned this could be due to the purification rituals they undergo with the mother's blood. And while I agree that this could explain the discrepancy, it really is just speculation. This also brings to mind the Sanguine Nobles, members of Mohg's forces who are growing horns on their bodies. These members of Mohg's court take on an omen-like appearance, but many believe that this is due to the blood that they've been infused with by their master. It's interesting that by purifying the blood dropped by the Mother of Wounds, one may be able to rid themselves of horns, even if it leads to the twisted bodies of the Bloodfiends. But when Mohg shares his accursed blood with his followers, they sprout horns. According to the Mohgwyn Spear, she is an outer god who bestows power upon accursed blood. Maybe her connection to the Bloodfiends is what allows her to grant this power to Mohg. After all, the blood of the horn-sent is considered accursed in the lands between. When looking at these creatures, we see most can be found topside, wielding a weapon called the Bloodfiend's arm. This bludgeon is described as an arm pulled from the corpse of one of their kin and wielded as a makeshift weapon. Having been sanctified by a blood ritual, this armament is capable of spraying blood stored within when executing a strong attack. The Bloodfiends don't seem to be overly concerned with the lives of their kin, as so many of them are found feasting on their brothers. The fact that these weapons are so common among the Bloodfiends leads me to believe that every one of them has been sanctified by a blood ritual, meaning this damaging blood exists within all of their bodies. In fact, we can catch these monsters practicing a blood ritual in the Rivermouth Cave, near the ancient ruins base, and within the Rao ruins. A leader chants and stabs into the air, as if to cut into the Mother of Wounds herself. This isn't new to the Tarnished, because to enter the Land of Shadow, we must defeat Mohg, who practices this very same ritual. We are witnessing the process by which the Bloodfiends worship the Mother of Truth, and gain strength. The Bloodfiend at the front of this ritual is a hexer, and wields the Bloodfiend's sacred spear, stabbing it into the air, as one of his tribe sits before him, seemingly ready to open a wound for their mother. Great Spear of the Bloodfiend Hexers, one of the most significant implements used in their blood rituals. Sacred spears of blood are the instruments of communion with an outer god. The Mother of Truth desires a wound. It would seem that this ritual we found ourselves observing is one in which the Bloodfiends are trying to commune with their god. However, I'm willing to bet the Mother of Wounds is not able to speak with them directly, due to the veil cast over the Land of Shadow, obscuring its presence from the lands between. This would mean the Bloodfiends are continually reaching out to a god that can't hear them, and who's much more busy leading Mohg, at least until Miquella's influence took his senses from him. Even so, the ability Bloodfiend's Boon does seem to imply that at one time, these creatures were closer to the Mother than Mohg ever was. It's similar to Blood Boon Ritual, which creates explosions of blood, but it's much more controlled, as if the Bloodfiends are practiced in how to wield this power, and can control where they want the Mother's blood to go. The Bloodfiend's Fork tells us how they offer their own wounds to their mother in order to slake her thirst. Weapon used by the Bloodfiends, 3 tines of carved bone spear the victim to provoke blood loss. A ritual implement for blood offerings to the Formless Mother. At times, the Bloodfiends would spill even their own blood using these forks. Just as Luminary Mohg wants his forces to spill blood to fill his pits, the Bloodfiends let what blood they can to appease their mother, even going so far as to offer their own life essence to feed her craving. The literal river of blood we find ourselves standing in during this ritual was most likely not created from the Bloodfiends dragging people down into their lair, but rather a mixture of both their blood and that of the Formless Mother, which they're able to spill when their rituals succeed. The Bloodfiends can sometimes drop sacred bloody flesh, a raw meat soaked with blood, a delicacy of the Bloodfiends, temporarily boosts physical attack power and arcane. When blood loss occurs nearby, further boosts attack power. The blood is said to have fallen from the formless mother's wound. Never will it dry, never will it rot. As we saw with Mohg during our battle, stabbing into the air to produce blood and pulling flaming blood from seemingly nowhere is exactly what the Mother of Wounds wants. Both he and the Bloodfiend spill her blood in order to make themselves more powerful. It seems when performing these rituals, the blood of the Mother herself will fall from the wounds they inflict with their spears, and that blood is then used to soak a piece of flesh, literally taken off of one of their own. By ingesting this flesh, now purified through the Mother's blood, we're able to boost our physical and arcane attack power, gaining the strength of the Mother herself, then being granted even more power when we trigger blood loss in our foes. Through her own wounds and craving for even more bloodshed, she empowers her followers to continue their worship of her. I wish there were more to say about the Bloodfiends, but this is seemingly it outside of the description of the sanguine amaryllis. A blood flower with meaty petals, grown by Bloodfiends in pools of blood. Perhaps even the fiends admire blood's beauty. This item implies that beauty can sprout from the blood spilled in the name of the formless mother, and that the Bloodfiends, while they look simple and deformed, have the capacity to admire the resilience of these flowers. This hints at a richer internal life within the Bloodfiends you wouldn't expect. It's interesting to think these heavy, rodent-looking monsters could look at a flower blooming from the very blood they spill and feel something deeper. An admiration for how this plant is able to thrive surrounded by blood, just as the Bloodfiends hope to. Perhaps there is more behind their appearance than there seems to be. However, there are no Bloodfiend NPCs or friendly characters in Shadow of the Erdtree, so we must piece together what we can to make sense of them. They simply overrun the areas where they're found, such as Prospect Town where they likely originated. Then again, if they were previously Hornsent, perhaps these lands were already their home, before they were twisted into the monstrosities they are now. I think it's interesting to note the importance of plants and the lands between being reminiscent of their gods. We know that the Nectarblood Burgeon is a young shoot heavy with velvety purple nectar, said to burgeon forth where the nectar-like blood of abandoned Trina pooled. Now we have the sanguine amaryllis, another flower that only blooms in adversity, surrounded by the blood of the Mother of Wounds and cultivated by the Bloodfiends. Each of these items shows how the blood of gods holds a power our blood does not. Through blood alone they can create life, and it seems the Bloodfiends understand this, going so far as to give the Mother of Wounds a foothold in the Land of Shadows by growing her very own flowers. I find that no matter how many times I look at the Bloodfiends, I'm struck by a sense of pity. These enemies may have once been Hornsent driven away by the forces of the tower and forced to cower below ground, all because they found their new god in the flames of their old deity, or rather, she found them. If the story of Luminary Mohg is any indication, it seems as though the Mother of Wounds wants to seek out those who have been shunned by their society, making them easier to manipulate, so that she might invite her wrath on the lands between and the Land of Shadow. Before she convinced Mohg to be her vassal, she had the entirety of the Bloodfiends walking the Land of Shadow, finding people worth running through with their spears so they might appease her with blood offerings. The only reason the Bloodfiends are found in this sorry state is because the other Hornsent have made a habit of subjugating the races around them, and without the influence of Mesmer, the Bloodfiends would have never made contact with the Formless Mother, never felt the strength of her flesh, and never would have started offering the blood of others and themselves up to her. This is the sad state we find them in when we reach the Land of Shadow, and there's no changing their fate now. Best to avoid these creatures and their rituals, lest your own blood join the pools they've cultivated deep below the Land of Shadow, where the rivers run red. Thank you for joining us for this breakdown of the Bloodfiends, one of the most monstrous creatures we face across the Land of Shadow. Do you believe the Bloodfiends were once demi-humans? Horn-sent? Or were they their own race? Why did the Mother of Wounds move on from them to Mohg? Was Mohg aware that he was not the first vassal of his outer god? How does the Mother of Wounds keep reaching those who can spread her influence? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.